Well, good afternoon and welcome again, Ron Gibson. We've been having a tremendous number of people commenting on how valuable, how much information they are gleaning from the interviews and all of what you have been sharing with us having to do with constitutional law. So I want to welcome you again and I look forward to today's interview.
Well, thank you, Kathleen. It's always a pleasure to be on your program and also to participate with your listening and viewing audience. Uh, I want to say something here very personal. I try my very best to present information that is credible. I don't ever want to be known as somebody that, I'll call it shoot from the hip, if you please, or whatever. Uh, if I were to tell you the amount of research hours that I have put in my life of seeking the truth, you probably wouldn't believe me. I don't smoke, I don't chew, and I don't go with the girls that do, but I study, and I study, and I study, and I study. And I'm 73 years old, 75 years old, whatever, 46, and it's starting to pay off. I wish I would have known at 40 what I know today, but I guess the Bible says all things come in due season. But I have a wealth of information. People are beginning to listen, and I want to just kind of confess something. For the last good 35, maybe 40 years, I have been on the rooftop, so to speak, just screaming from the top of my voice for people to listen what I had to say. Not to focus on Ron, that's not my point at all, but from the information that I knew to be true and the law that I know to be true. See, statutes and codes, folks, are not law. Those are corporate rules and regulations, and you are not bound by that unless you volunteer to be subject to those rules and regulations. And I'm not just saying that. If you go to, um, trying to think of the case, I got so much stuff on my mind. I apologize. Uh, I'll think of it in a minute. But anyway, the court makes reference to that uh, our bond is to our Creator. That's where our allegiance should go. That's where our seeking of knowledge should go. That's why God gave us a Bible. And the greatest guidebook and love story ever written is that Bible. You may not think so, but you live long enough, and some of you have lived longer than I have, some not as long. But I'm telling you, what a miraculous book. And the wisdom in that thing is beyond comprehension. It just it just thrills me to talk about it. But anyway, we're going to cover some stuff here today. Uh, that primarily being that of jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is something most people do not understand, and the jurisdiction simply means the right to do. That's the real simplest definition I can give you. The right to do. But it also has a restrictive covenant. Without that having jurisdiction, you have no right to do. Are you with me here? So you have a positive side to the jurisdictional question and you have a negative side to it. And maybe both of them could be viewed as positive because the things that you can't do are a protective covenant relative to the things that the jurisdiction is supposed to allow and protect at the same stroke. And so I want to get into several cases here that really illustrate the jurisdictional question. And one of them is Moneray versus Del Monte Dunes. And if you're interested in the citation of that, it's 526 U.S. Now, whenever in a citation after the case name shows up and you see the capital letters U period S period, that means that it's United States Supreme Court case. Okay? Very few cases have been overturned at the Supreme Court level. They're kind of the granddaddy of the authority, if you please. Excuse me. And so therefore, these cases, unless they've been overturned, stand to this very day. And so, let me go on with it. 526 U.S. 143 capital L space capital E small d, the number 2 small d 882 119 capital S period capital C small t period. And those are what they call the citations of this Moneray versus Del Monte Nunes case. That, by the way, is a 1999 case. So it's not that old, just so that you know. But I want to read some stuff here to you. To me, this stuff's fascinating. It says the district court's jury instructions directed the jury that, number one, that it should find for the landowner if the jury found that A, the landowner had been denied all economical value of the use of his property, or B, the city's decision did not substantially advance a legitimate public purpose. Now I want to stop there. Whenever there is an enactment by a city, a county, a state, that has to be for the purpose of the public good, or it has no standing. Are you with me?
You're saying that unless there is, I think I missed that a little bit. Could you repeat that for me?
Yes. Whenever there is an enactment by the city or the county or the state for the public good, there must be just cause to do that. But there are very strict limits on what they can do that does not infringe or take away or diminish the private rights of you and I, the individual.
Huh.
So having said that, then in essence in this Moneray versus Del Monte Nunes case, that was the question before the court. And so that's the issue that they're addressing. It says, the city's decision did not substantially advance a legitimate public purpose. Are you with me here? In other words, whenever a government entity enacts something, it has to be for the public benefit, not at the restriction of the individual's rights and property. And they get that all mixed up, if you hear what I'm saying.
Well, and what we're talking about really is the Fourth Amendment, right? That we have the right to protect our papers, our property, ourselves.
That's
so,
correct.
But what you're talking about, they're not mixing the Constitution with Admiralty law here, right? How are they doing that? I mean, they're using terminology like rights, like the Bill of Rights that are secured in the Constitution, but how do we know which jurisdiction they're really working within when they use all that fancy language?
That is such a perfect question. And the answer to that is turn that damn television off and get into a law book or go to the internet, and it's loaded with stuff. But as long as we want to watch that boob tube, we're being fed poison in every area of our life. So you have to choose, folks, what you want to do. You want to be fed lies and bullshit and misrepresentation, or are you seeking the truth? And my Bible tells me that we should always seek the truth, because when you do, then proper things come into focus. God blesses us with that ability of us to do that. So here they're addressing the issue here in this particular case about whether in fact the information being presented is of relative value. That's the thing that we need to be careful of. When you're making a decision, if you ever sit on a jury, you need to remember that the right of the individual is to be protected at all cost. When you sacrifice that, then you carry the blame, because now the burden is on you for not doing what's right. And my Bible teaches me, always do what's right. Now, sometimes we blunder. That's the element of confessing our sin. God forgives us, and we can go forward with a clean heart. But as long as we are manipulated, or we are intended to manipulate a situation or somebody else, there's always going to be heartache at the end of the road. And this case very adequately and eloquently addresses that issue. Excuse me. Excuse me. And it says here, and I'm reading off of this out of this case, and it said the city did not substantially advance a legitimate public purpose. The jury awarded the landowner $8 million for the takings of their property and $1.5 million for the city's unlawful acts, not just compensation for providing an adequate post-deprivation remedy for the loss. In other words, the public entities cannot come into your private life and your private properties, or property or properties plural, and then diminish that right that you have to that, or to take that right away from you.
Wow.
When they do that, they are subject to damages, and that's what this case is about.
Wow.
And the jury awarded them $8 million on a portion of the taking, and $1.45 million to the city for an unlawful act. Listen to what that said, folks. Listen to words. Words are important if they're properly documented. For unlawful actions, we have a so-called government that is not a government. It's a corporation masquerading as a government that is in actions that are not in law. They are in statutes and codes. Statutes and codes, folks, is not law. Those are corporate rules and regulations that you and I are not bound by that unless we volunteer to be bound by those rules and regulations. And boy, I'm telling you, I pray to God you never forget that. Because if you do, you're going to get sucked into that, and they're just going to have you for lunch. So we need to pay attention and turn off that boob tube and do a little bit of you don't have to be a Philadelphia lawyer of which to get your feet under you. It's amazing what a little bit will do if you're in the right area. And if you're in question, by golly, get a hold of me. Be glad to help you, whatever, or somebody that has got a similar type background. Attorneys, folks, are not lawyers. I'm going to repeat that. Attorneys are not lawyers. Lawyers deal, I'm a lawyer. I deal in LAW, law. Attorneys deal in statutes and codes. Statutes and codes are corporate rules and regulations that from the boundaries of that per se only apply to those who are part of that corporation. But that's why they hook you in to these different methods to get you by a permit, to buy a license, all of that. Then they maliciously suck you into that and then say, now our corporate rules and regulations now apply to you. That nullifies that because it's done under fraud. And fraud negates any and all contracts. Are you with me? When they suck you in, they've done it by the presentment that it's a contract. You're now bound. But when they do it in the means and the elements of fraud, it negates that. In other words, it wipes it out. It's no longer effective. And that's what the court in this particular case, and I got a whole bunch of this stuff. But I mean, if you're interested in this, it's fascinating. But I'm going to ask you listening folks out there to pay attention, because you may be the next victim of this ungodly system we call a court system. This is not a court system. It is a tribunal, a private tribunal. It is not a legitimate court. Legitimate courts function on the basis of LAW, law, or LAWS, laws, not corporate rules and regulations that are not law. And that's the difference. So you're only bound if you volunteer to be subject to those rules and regulations. And I'm going to quote you a court case that I want you folks to write it down, and please go look it up on the internet. But it's called the City of Dallas versus Mitchell. And in that case, the court stated very clearly that we are not subject to corporate rules and regulations. Did you hear that? We're not subject to that unless we volunteer to be subject to those rules and regulations. So if you're out there, you folks, in every aspect of your life, you're getting beat up by the court system, you need to go into the mirror and look and say, what did I do to position myself in this to be subject to this? Now, there are abuses that affect innocent people, but in most cases, folks, we bring it upon ourselves. And then we cry our eyes out, boy, this is, somebody did that. We want to blame everybody, but rather than take personal responsibility. And I see that every single day. I get sick to death of it, because people want to act irresponsible, and then when those consequences come home to roost, right in the middle of their life, then, oh my God, gee whiz, Joe Blow's to blame, and Mary's to blame, and Henry's to blame, the court's to blame. No, they're not. We didn't educate ourselves. See, we're educated in the wrong things for the most part. It's beginning to change, and I thank God for that. But we watch the 6 o'clock news. We read the local newspaper. I can show you over and over and over and over and over and over of most of what's in the news, of the 6 o'clock news and the newspaper, is fabricated for a specific agenda. And I've seen it my entire life. I used to watch the 6 o'clock news. I used to read the newspaper. But boy, I'm telling you, when God opened my eyes, I just was ashamed that I had spent so much time and effort of watching a bunch of garbage and putting it application in my life, when in fact it was nothing but crap. So anyway, enough of that. But the point that I'm trying to make here, folks, is that a little bit of knowledge goes a long, long, long way. And I want to go on with this because this stuff's beautiful. The county is liable. Listen to this carefully, folks. The county is liable for any city employee violating the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. The property owner owns all bundle of rights that come with the deed. I don't know if you folks know that, but when you receive your property, even if it's a warranty deed, there are many rights that you inherit with that. Kathleen, I don't know what happened, but we got something.
I don't know. I think it's on your screen. I can see you.
There we go. But anyway, the point that I'm making here is the fact that we need to be careful what they're, oh, for crying out loud. And I'm just saying that we need to be careful where we put our allegiance as far as the gathering of information. And I'm going to tell you, folks, there's a whole lot of lies and bullcrap out there. But if you do a little bit of homework, and you know, God says, and I'm a Christian, doesn't make me better than anybody else, but I'm a believer in my Bible. And it said, when we seek godly wisdom, God will share with us the truth. And boy, if anything we need today is the truth. There's so much phony stuff out there that it's hard to even keep things in proper perspective because of that. But let me go on.
You were
The
talking
property,
about the county is liable for any city employee of the taking of the Fifth Amendment.
that is correct, because the cities are under the umbrella of the county jurisdiction. They're cities within the county. So as a result of that, there is accountability and there is liability. And very few people know and understand that. You know, this thing of law, I'm going to digress just a moment. When I was going to law school, it fascinated me how the element of law is structured. I mean, you go to Leviticus in the Bible and it talks a lot about setting up the laws in the court system and different ways to handle different situations. But I'm going to tell you, it's fascinating. I guess that's maybe one of the reasons that I was drawn to it. I never wanted to be an attorney. I'm not an attorney, I'm a lawyer. And I deal in law best I can. I got to deal in certain circumstances with things that are statutes and codes, but only to try to use it as a steering rudder back to what the true law is. And very few people know what the true law is. And then we wonder why there's chaos in our country. And there are spiritual laws that are tremendously violated within the family, even within our community, our state, and our nation. And then we wonder why the 6 o'clock news is such chaos, and that's the reason that we have taken our focus off of our guiding light, which is the Lord. That's why He gave us the Bible, and why we stumble and fall, because man wants to do it on his own, and it doesn't work very well. But anyway, to go on to the Fifth Amendment, the property owner owns all the bundle of rights that come with his deed, as he bought it as is, and nobody can convert, alter, change, or amend his deed except him. Did you catch that?
Mhm.
That's why when you buy a piece of property, with that property comes rights. Whether anybody wants to acknowledge the rights of that is a whole other issue, because the government section and the private corporation section of all of this stuff will try to tell you that all that you have is that you got to obey this and you got to obey that. You can't do this and you can't do that. I get so sick of that I want to vomit, because that's not the true story. And so then the question has to come about, then what's the other side of that? And that's the fact that you have rights, you have God-given rights, and that's why God gave us that. And we also have a free will to choose what we want, to believe what we want. But if you're going to go down that road, folks, be careful. Make sure it's the right road, because it can be a lot of heartache if you don't. Okay, let's go on. The law forbids the city or the county to amend any deed, steal any deed, restrict its use, or to use deceit, extortion, fear, threats to get the owner to amend it by restricting his ownership use, such as livestock, property, and other elements to property ownership.
So Ron, you could use this very statute, could you not, if someone was attempting to claim a prescriptive easement through your property? You could
Yes.
you could argue this.
Well, the other thing about that is the very fact that, at least in our country here, and I'm sure, and I say I live in Southern Oregon, here, that the Gestapo wants to tell you how many cattle you can have on your land, how many chickens you can have, whatever. They have no authority to tell you anything of that or to restrict. Now, here's the other side of that. If your animals are creating a potential health hazard to the neighbor, now the code enforcement has authority. But as long as you keep your animals properly maintained and all of that, then in essence, they have no authority at all. And I get into these court cases all the time, and you have to slap them around a little bit to help them to understand they don't have authority to tell you how many pigs or chickens you can have or how many vehicles you can have on your property, because it is private property. There's a reason for that word private. It belongs to you, or you and your husband, or you and your family alone, and no one else has any authority and or jurisdiction. So when somebody starts doing that, have them show you in law. And then they'll come up and say, well, the county ordinance is. A county ordinance is not law, folks. That only applies to people who want to subject themselves to that garbage. And boy, I could tell you story after story after story, but I won't take the time here today. But my point is simply this. You have to stand up. And they want to come at you with their hatchet. There's many, many defenses against that. And I love taking on those cases simply because they have no law, no standing in law. Let me put it that way. Okay? A statute and code can never supersede or have priority over law. There's no provision in that anywhere. Not anywhere. And they'll try to tell you it is. Well, you know, we're going to write you a citation for this ordinance and violation of that ordinance. An ordinance, folks, is not law. An ordinance is, it is only effective if you yield to it. Did you catch that? Only if you yield to that. And once you volunteer, they got their hook in your mouth. So you have to decide what you want to be subject to. Okay, let's go on. The law forbids the city and the county to amend any deed, steal any deed, restrict its use, or use it in any kind of deceit, extortion, fear, threats to get the owner to amend it by restricting his ownership, use of his livestock and or property or his land. Did you catch that? Now, I don't know about you folks, but that's pretty powerful to me. This is right out of the United States Supreme Court case called Moneray versus Del Monte Dunes. Okay? Post-deprivation laws also attaches to the sale of any agriculture or other commodity or interstate or intrastate commerce, which sales are diminished by the takings restriction. I can't even begin to tell you. I live in an agricultural area, in the timber area, and you would not believe how many restrictions there are on products that come off of the farm now, or that come off the ranches, and all of this stuff. And I'm gonna tell you something, folks. Very little, if any, of it's lawful. Might be legal, but it's not lawful. Okay? So, legal and lawful are not one and the same. So, post-deprivation laws also attaches to the sale of any agriculture or other commodity or interstate or intrastate commerce, which sales were diminished by the takings restriction. See, that's what they do, folks. If you're a good producer of agriculture product, cattle, chicken, sheep, whatever the issue is, there's somebody out there that wants to have a regulation that regulates you from making a full profit or from doing whatever you're capable of doing when they don't have a dime invested in your project. Always somebody trying to step in where they have no lawful authority. And that's where I shine, because I'm Yaqui Indian, and man, I'm telling you, these people don't scare me at all. I love to go. I'm not saying that to be bragging to you folks here. I'm just telling you that's my nature. A lot of people want to run. Oh my gosh, no. Boy, I'm going to tell you, I get my Indian tomahawk and I come after you. So that's how I handle it. And I want to be careful. Maybe I shouldn't even say that, but it's just a figuratively speaking. I don't bow down to these people until they can prove to me that they have superior authority over my God-given rights. And I'm 75 years old, and I have never found any man that has superiority over my God-given rights. But I have a responsibility to Almighty God to protect that which He has entrusted to my care. And I take that serious. It's the reason that I went to law school. And I'm not afraid of government people. They want to come and arrest me, then boy, you better be willing to go the distance, because now you got a fight on your hands. But I love teaching. I love helping people, and I love motivating people. You know, most people are timid. Oh my gosh, what can I do? I better not do that. I run into that all the time. You need to stand up, you need to speak up, and you need to take a step forward for defending what is rightfully God-given yours. You work for your land, you pay for your land, you have a right then to have dominion over your land, not some outsider. And I have people all the time that call and come and see me, and Ron, the government's doing this, or the code enforcement's doing that, when in fact they don't have any authority over that at all. Yes, Kathleen, did you have a comment or question?
So what does a person do? What is their response, Ron, when someone from the county comes and declares that the landowner is in violation with the county ordinance? What is the response?
The county ordinance, the thing that you do is challenge the validity of that ordinance, because the county ordinance cannot supersede private rights.
So how do you challenge it?
You just told them, show me in law. Statutes and codes, folks, are not law. They're just that. They're corporate rules and regulations. You're only bound by law unless you volunteer to be subject to statutes and codes. That's what people don't get. I've been trying to drive that in to their head for years. Many have. A lot of them just fall to the wayside. They, you know, there's an old saying, there's three types of people. Those who make things happen. Number two, those who watch things happen. And number three, those who look around one day and wonder what happened. And I run into that concept all the time.
So Ron, if someone comes to my place and says, you have 3 chickens too many, you're violating the county ordinance. And my response would be to them, show me in law how that ordinance supersedes
applicable to you, exactly.
Supersedes my private rights on my deeded land.
That's correct.
And so they'll probably shake their head in wonderment about what language I just spoke to them. Would you not think?
Well, they're not used to somebody standing up and telling them what you just stated. See, that's the thing. They have dumbed down America to the point that they think that they're slaves, and now we act like slaves. Dangerous, 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 folks. Go ahead.
So then, Ron, let's say they say, well, you're violating the ordinance, and then they send me a bill for violation of the ordinance. And then they threaten me and say, well, I'm going to send out the sheriff and have that sheriff arrest you. I mean, this is government, right? Government is used to using a strong arm, right? And their weaponry. So how do we respond back in those situations?
Well, first of all, you demand to see the law. Now they're going to tell you that statutes and codes is law. And I'm here to tell you statutes and codes is not law. It is corporate rules and regulations. And you're only subject to that if you volunteer to be subject to that. And boy, I mean to tell you, they come and arrest you, now you got it by the cojones, because that's an unlawful arrest. It is out without lawful merit, and now they're subject to damages.
So we must understand the language and how to respond to them. And at every step of their unlawful actions, we need to know how to respond back, as what you're just telling us.
And I don't know if I'm doing a very good job, Kathleen, but that's what I try to do on your program.
That's
here,
great.
Is to let people know that don't cower down to those people. And don't get stupid either. You know, a lot of people don't know how to handle that kind of situation, and they pull a gun and point it at somebody. That's not the time or the place for that. But the point of it is,
Bless you.
I remember a judge in a court case that I witnessed. I wasn't a party to it, but I was. And the judge told this gentleman something I will never forget. He said, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. And not that they aren't available, because they are, but they're ignorant of what it takes to do or say or not say, whichever the case may be. And I sat there in that courtroom as an observer, and I'm listening to this, and I thought, what a profound statement that is. Folks, we need to change our priorities, and we need to get away from that boob tube at 6 o'clock at night, or stupid programs that numb the brain and our senses, and start paying attention to what's going around us, to our lives, our health, our property. And boy, I mean to tell you what, I've challenged some people on a pretty heavy level of this, and they've come back to say, God, Ron, thank you, because it woke them up. You want to sit in front of that television, I call it a boob tube, every night there, and feed on that garbage, then that's your choice. But I'm telling you, down the road, there are consequences to doing that. God gave us a body and a bright, healthy mind, and we have a God-given responsibility of which to utilize that for the benefit of His purpose in our life. And so these supplemental roadblocks or stumbling blocks that come our way, we can hurdle those, but you got to be willing to do it in order to get it done. And I get into a lot of speaking engagements and address the issue of our motive for what we do and when we do what we do. And boy, that's a fascinating subject, let me tell you, because most people look around and wonder what happened, you know. But anyway, not to prolong that point. You were going to say something, Kathleen. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. So what we must really have is, we almost need to have a script written out for these various circumstances, so that when we come up against them, it's a script we've studied, it's a script we're familiar with, it's a script of understanding our own empowerment, our sovereignty, so that we're not like a deer in the headlights every time one of these affronts hits us, because they will, and they are continuous. So the language that you gave us, show me the law, I am only bound by law, is very important. That would be a very critical statement to write down, and to understand that we're not bound by statutes and codes.
That's correct. Pardon me.
So that people actually know this language, because they're English words, but for those of us who aren't fluent in law, they might not hold the depth of the meaning and the freedom that they must, in order for us to really assert our rights and to be free in this world.
You know, I remember you brought to mind a deal that I heard one time. The judge told the litigant, uh, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. And most people misunderstand what that means. What he was telling them, if you don't know your rights, then in essence you don't know how to protect your rights or or exert your rights. That was the point that he was making to them,
Mhm.
and that's true because when the judge knows or the county knows that you know what your rights are and you're willing to defend it, they don't want to deal with you. They want sheep who bow down and they can manipulate and people they can walk over and people they can threaten and they cower down. That's the people that they love to deal with. It and I've noticed in my life it's a power trip. You find many of the people in government position are hungry for power. And there's an old saying, never was a lion so vicious as an ungodly man with power.
Yeah.
And boy, how true that is. But all I'm trying to share here with you folks today is the very fact that you don't have to know it all. You don't have to even remotely know it all, but know just a little bit. Familiarize yourself with little here and little there. And it's amazing the confidence builder that does in you because you know what the law is. The statutes and codes are not law, folks. Statutes and codes are corporate rules and regulations. Unless you're part of the corporation, you're not bound by those statutes and codes. And that's what we have allowed to happen in our country going clear back to 1946. I think of June 11th, right in that era, that we converted from laws to statutes and code, or the beginning of statutes and codes. Statutes and codes is not law. People treat it like law, but it's corporate rules and regulations. And unless you're part of the corporation, you're not bound by that. And so, go ahead.
Well, so what we're talking about then is in order to become more fully aware of the law, we're talking about needing to understand our own birthrights, the Bill of Rights that are secured within the Constitution. And so people need to pick up a copy of the Constitution, which is pretty simple, minimal, and start studying it because within that is the Bill of Rights, the amendments. So studying certainly from 1 to 14 with great seriousness.
Well,
Would you say that would be a good starting point?
I would say that would be an excellent starting point. Folks, let me say, this stuff is not complicated. Our laws were written so that a third grade education could read and know and understand. A third grade, okay? So don't stand back there and say, well, boy, that's too complicated for me. I mean, that doesn't speak very highly of your self-evaluation, if I can put it in that context. But it's not rocket science, folks. It's common sense. And God gave us that ability to use our God. That's a gift of God to us. And we need to use it. Pardon me. And when we don't, we get in trouble. So, but anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here in this, that you're not bound by stuff because somebody else tells you you are. God made you a free and sovereign individual, accountable only to Him. And when we do His will, that usually takes care of who's right, if you hear what I'm saying.
Well, I think perhaps one of the most potent, but one of the most awakening elements is that no man has any jurisdiction, has any authority to rule over us, that is truly a master-slave scenario. And so the government, as it is situated right now with its codes and statutes, is attempting to rule over sovereign people
That is correct.
whose rights are secured in the Constitution. And for people to not, for men and women to not claim their sovereignty and truly understand that there is no one that has the authority over them, that's probably one of the biggest awakenings for most people. And the words are profound.
Well, and that's absolutely true, Kathleen. And, you know, when you start to study true law, you don't have to know it all. But I'm telling you what, it's intoxicating because you begin to realize what the fullness that God intended for us, His creation, to be, and that we're to be free and free indeed, not to be a slave, and at least a slave to man. And so we all have a free will. We all have a right to choose what we want to choose. But folks, I want to caution you on something. I've been in this old world for 75 years. I certainly don't know it all. I don't claim to. But walk carefully. Watch where you step. Because there are many, many, many traps, and many of them deceptive traps, to get you bound or incapacitated emotionally, spiritually, whatever the case is. And that's why in my life I serve the Lord. And God keeps me safe on my path to keep from falling into the pitfalls that are out there. And boy, I'm going to tell you something, folks. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of them. Okay? All right. Let's go on. It says this includes anything that the landowner would buy for his use and enjoyment of his property, building material, landscaping, gardening, supplies, animal feed, livestock, pets, vehicles, etc. Damages for the taking without just compensation or the extortion will be decided by a jury pursuant to the 7th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Those are called, folks, unlawful takings. And there's no provision in law for them to do that, and yet many are trying it. That's why you need to know enough to say, wait a minute, you're violating my God-given rights. And your rights don't come from men. Your right comes from Almighty God. Even if you're a non-believer, your rights still come from God. So you have to decide where your allegiance is. You have to decide what pathway that you want to follow. And God said, if you follow the right path, I'll bless you. And if you want to go on your own, then you're going to have to deal with what comes, come what may, as the saying goes. Okay? All right. West Virginia versus Board of Education versus Barnett. The United States government set up to the consent of the governed. Most people don't even know what I just said. Let me read it again. I want you to listen. The United States government was set up by the consent of the governed. Now I'm going to ask you folks a question out there. What does that mean? It means that we the people are the boss. That means we the people have dominance over the government of which we created. It means we the people have a right to police, if I can use the term, the elements within that jurisdiction that we give to government. Government is necessary, there's no question about it. But I'm going to tell you what, folks, there are a bunch of thieves in government who want to reach out and they want to steal from you your rights and your property, and especially your dignity. The question is, are you going to let them do it? That's the tragedy that I see across this great land. We got people that just surrender, don't want to put up a fight, they don't want to learn what's right, they don't want to do what's right, and they wonder why they're in bondage. And that's the reason, folks, is because we were unwilling to learn, we had a rebellious spirit, and we don't want to do what God commands us to do. Now, I'm not trying to give a Sunday sermon here, but I'm telling you, this thing called Almighty God is a very critical factor in life, no matter where you're at. And I know I've lived 75 years of my life in that realm. And I've been through some hard times. Ron's life has not been a bed of roses. But I depended upon Almighty God, and He brought me through. And I'm telling you, I will stand before Him one day in the award ceremony, and He will say, "Good and faithful servant, my servant Ron." And here's the blessings for eternity. Boy, I don't know about you, that excites me to no end. I don't know it all, folks. I don't claim to know it all. But I've spent a lifetime of study. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't chew, I don't take drugs, but I study, and I study, and I study, and I study, and I study. Now, that's not for everyone, I realize that. But maybe that's why God put me in a position to be on Kathleen's program here. He'd have to be the one to answer that. But I'm telling you, I'm known across the nation. I don't say that to be patting Ron on the back. I don't mean that at all. But God has used my background and whatever in patents and in law. I'm known across the nation in multiple countries. And I have to tell you, I thank God for that. Because my heart's desire is to get the truth out. I don't want to deal with lies and deception and all of that garbage. I don't have time in my life for it. But the stuff we're talking about, folks, has to do with your God-given rights. And you have to make the decision. I can't make it for you. Kathleen can't make it for you about what the priorities that you're going to put in the forefront of your life.
Well, it seems, Ron, that there has been forever, since the beginning of time, a penchant for those who hunger for power and want to enslave people. So it's nothing new, really. What we're seeing today is an awakening of people looking to find a way to live without having a master putting a yoke on their shoulders across their neck and enslaving them. And that we now have these possibilities to truly become educated and make a choice. And I know I've shared with you a couple of cases in the courts that I'm involved with, and it's been absolutely stunning to stand before these black robed judges who are acting in this theater. It's not a court of law. It's not a court of justice. It's very clear that the bar attorneys are getting paid regardless what happens, and that they are also paying the judges. So we're looking at an administrative court that's for profit, that's listed on Dun and Bradstreet. And even though the court's mission statement claim that they must take an oath, the judges must take an oath and uphold the national and the state constitutions, they perjure their oath every single day.
Exactly.
And for us to understand that, and for me to see that and understand that, and then stand in front of them as a sovereign woman, asserting my rights and refusing to acknowledge to their jurisdiction, is a very empowering posture, and everyone can do it. And once we do it in multiples and in hundreds and thousands, this system will come tumbling down. Do you not think?
Well, you're absolutely correct. The one thing, Kathleen, that is really a bright light at the end of the dark tunnel, if I can put it in that context, that there are common law courts being erected across this land. And common law courts are godly ordained and godly blessed courts because they're courts of justice. Uh, and there's a great deal of the eagle eye, if I can put it in that context, of these courts that are now arising under these common law courts, because the people who have been suffered greatly are watching and help construct or reconstruct these new courts. They're not new. That's what we started with, and then it got prostituted. So, having said that, then in essence, here we are having to deal with this ugly gorilla that wants to do everything to take everything you have, to destroy your dignity, and especially destroy our God-given rights.
Mhm.
And I refuse to yield to that.
I do too. And that's what it does take. One either acquiesces and becomes a slave to the master slave system of maritime contract law, or one stands freely, asserting their own jurisdiction and their sovereign rights. There's no gray line. It's gray area. It's you're on one side or you're on the other. And I'm with you, Ron, and I appreciate your strength and courage to help bring this forward for all of us.
This is a little bit of a sidebar statement, and I want to be careful here, but I think it needs to be said. Each one of our lives will be laid totally bare before the Lord one day. And my solemn prayer for me is that the things that I've done in my life would bring honor and glory to the Lord. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I had no intention of doing all this law stuff. Yeah, I went to law school and all of that, but I never had a desire to be an attorney. Number one, that's a dirty word in my mouth. A lawyer and attorney, folks, are not one and the same. Don't let anybody fool you. Attorneys deal in statutes and codes. Their allegiance is to take everything from you that they can get. There is a deliberate act, an intent and motivation, and allegiance to destroy in this nation, this godly nation. And a lawyer is exactly the opposite, that we want to fulfill and uphold and to promote the law, God-given law, so that because when you do that, everybody benefits. And I've seen it in my life with a few times that light has been allowed to shine through. But we got a lot of wickedness out there. And one day we will all stand before Almighty God. Whether you believe that or not, that's your choice. But according to my Bible, that's the case. And I want to hear the words, "Enter in, thou good and faithful servant, to the presence of the Lord." And I'm telling you, but there's a lot of wickedness out there. There's a whole lot of misrepresentation and lies and distortion of the truth. And we're so bombarded with that every day. Sometimes, man, it's hard to even take a deep breath without that stuff going down our nostrils, if you please. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make here is, it's like Kathleen said, that we have to decide which road we're going to travel. And you have the right and the ability to make that choice. God gives you that free choice. And thank God that He does. But there's a scripture in my Bible, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Because that's never a dead end road. Never a dead end road. I could tell you stories, I won't, to where when I just surrendered it all to the Lord, miracles happened in my life. I can personally testify to that. And I'm not ashamed of my faith. And I want other people to know the same loving Lord that I do. But anyway, let's go on.
Well, Ron, I think we're probably almost ready at a close-up. You might want to do a summary of some of the key points and
Okay,
and then go forward with another installment next time.
another segment, huh?
Yes.
You mean you're gonna have me back?
Well, I think we've done quite a few very successful ones. Yes.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. I guess one of the things that I'd like to say in closing, folks, always seek the truth. I cannot emphasize enough about how important the truth is in every segment of our life. And we've got a whole lot of garbage that's been thrown in our path. And I mean a whole lot of garbage. But if we seek godly wisdom, God will carry you through and you won't fall into one of the mind traps on the thing. And I'm living proof of that. I could tell you stuff, I won't, but incidents in my life. And when I surrendered it to the Lord, man, oh man, what blessing came out of it. So we have to decide which road we want to travel. And I want to encourage you in that. And I thank Kathleen for allowing me to come on her program here and share what I have to share. But I will say, folks, this stuff's important. If it wasn't, I wouldn't waste my time because I have plenty of other stuff to do. Trust me. But I'm just saying that that our destiny is predicated upon the choices and the decisions that we make as an individual. And that's a free will that God gave us. We can choose to be better or we can choose to be better. Every situation can be a stepping stone or a stumbling block. All of that depends upon our choice of every circumstance in our life. And I want to wish you all the best. And I hope to see you in a couple of weeks. And this is fun. I enjoy bringing this stuff to you. Kathleen, I thank you. It's good to be back with you again. And Lord bless you all and be safe.
Thank you, Ron.